everyone. Thank you so much for joining Alternatives today, and happy Friday as we host this session on resiliency and well-being. And our guest today is Laura Buckwald. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Laura, and then we will start. Laura is an adjunct member, faculty member at George Mason University, teaching foundations of well-being and resilience, and develops curriculum and instructs George Mason University's Center for the Advancement of Well-being's executive education leadership and their well-being programs. She has taught resiliency and well-being in the U.S. government leadership development programs and has conducted resiliency workshops for educators. Laura founded the Human Vitality and Resiliency Center, which provides trainings to empower individuals to build their resiliency and well-being and develop resilient leaders who promote well-being. She also offers Train the Trainer programs for individuals who wish to become well-being and resilience practitioners and teachers. Laura has spent 32 years with the U.S. government as a Foreign Service officer, living and working extensively in the Middle East and Eastern Europe, including war zone service in Iraq. She has held several leadership positions and has extensive experience assessing foreign political events, guiding policymakers, developing foreign government agencies, and training foreign officials. So thank you so much, Laura. You are quite the expert, and we're so glad to have you today. Thank you. I want to start, Laura, I think if we just take a look at what has been happening in our world, not just with COVID, but even the other events that are happening in our country, things seem very crazy right now, very unsettling. I think many of us are looking to say, what can we do? There's an action behind it. And so resiliency now, I just know more than ever, is so crucial. And so can you talk with us about that? What is resiliency and how do you define it?
Sure, Reagan, thank you so much. And first I want to say it's a real pleasure to be here with everybody today. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be able to be here with you and be able to support the important work that you all are doing. So yes, you're right. Resilience is probably more important now than it's ever been, although it's always something that's been important. And, you know, resilience is something that we need all the time. Where it's really tested is in moments like this, in moments of crisis. But it's something that we can and should be working on at all times. So the way I define resilience, or let me put it this way, the way a lot of people define resilience is, when you think of that, a lot of people think of the term bouncing back. You know, you're bouncing back from a hardship, from a trauma, from a difficult situation. So what that implies is that first something bad has to happen to you, and then hopefully you get through it. You come through that, and then again, hopefully you have learned something from that experience, which you can then apply to the next challenging situation that you might encounter. What the research has shown is that while that is correct, it's not completely correct. It's not a complete definition. So the way I define resilience is the ability to prepare for, to recover from, to adapt and grow in the face of stress, challenge, or adversity. So within that definition, I would highlight, underscore the very first part, which is the ability to prepare for some event which might happen in the future. So I would say that you know, particularly young people who you know, haven't had a lot of challenges in life yet, it's still important for young folks and even children to start building up that resilience, because I frankly can't think of anybody who hasn't had some challenge appear in their lives.
Right.
Even now, this is now a big group challenge, a worldwide challenge that we're all facing, and where we need to be able to call on our resilience to cope and manage with it. So that's what I would underscore about the definition is preparing for adversity.
Thank you. That's a great perspective. I think you're right. Oftentimes we do hear about bouncing back, but I like too how the definition you shared also talks about being able to grow, and that is certainly drawing upon our strengths and helping us to move forward. Laura, during your line of work, how have you seen the need for resiliency show up?
It's shown up in a number of ways. Right now, we're being challenged in ways that we haven't before. So I can tell you that with my students in particular, I have had some students, and we all probably know people who've lost their jobs in a situation. People who, I've had students who become ill with the virus, and we've known people become ill ourselves, perhaps, family members, or people experience some kind of a medical situation. Perhaps it's not COVID related. Nevertheless, it is serious, and we are not as apt to go out into the world and go out and seek medical attention when otherwise we really would, out of fear of this virus. I've had students that challenged in a number of ways. Situations like this also tend to exacerbate pre-existing conditions. So if you came into this with issues of depression or anxiety or other things, then it has been made even worse than it was before. So it is important for us to be able to tap our resilience right now.
Absolutely. And I think that's certainly what we're seeing even in our own community, and whether we are looking at what's happening in our neighborhood, like you said, loss of jobs, many of us trying to figure out how we are going to return to work, and being at home. And if you've been at home with your children, if you've been a caregiver of someone like you mentioned who is sick, and just what does this mean? We've been learning kind of week by week. And it changes so fast. And so trying to navigate this current time that we're in and things that are happening in our world and in our country, I think we can all identify ways that we are seeing resiliency show up. Laura, I know resiliency research has a long history, certainly. So can you share with us just some of the highlights from the research on resiliency that can help us today?
Sure. I would actually start out by asking our participants a question.
Great.
And I would ask them, and if they could just respond with a quick response in the chat. Mm-hmm. When have you experienced, and you can use the current situation if you like, or a previous experience, when have you in your life faced a challenge, an adversity, of an extremely difficult situation? Think about that time, and then think about what got you through that difficult time. And just send us a quick note through the chat on what helped you get through that difficult time.
We'll give folks a minute here to type in their answers. Mara has taking it one day at a time, family. Donna said cancer diagnosis, the support of family and close friends. Thank you. Amisha says prayer. That sense of faith. Staying positive, showing my kids how to overcome adversity. Yes, I think modeling, right, is certainly important. Definitely praying daily, family and church, says they. Maria says persistence, belief in a higher power. These are great answers, everyone. Thank you. You can keep adding to this beautiful list. Yes, Addie says faith and prayer. Wonderful. Thank you all for interacting with us, sharing your answers. Wonderful.
Do we have any more responses? Here, we got a couple more coming in.
A couple more. Knowing I had a child to raise. Yes. Anton says staying positive. The perspective. Great. Thank you. Faith, family, and friends. Perfect. Wonderful. Lovely answers. Thank you, attendees.
Allowing yourself to feel the emotion.
Having positive, caring adults. That's what someone wrote. Yeah, being future focused. These are beautiful answers.
Do we have any more responses?
Great.
Right. So actually, what you all touched on is exactly what the research shows. So after teaching this for a little while, I kind of was able to anticipate what your responses would be. And the research bears out that these are the same things that help us build resilience. So I'll take the one. So many of you talked about family, friends, that those are basically other people helping you, supporting you, helping you to get through that difficult time. That's what the research shows, is social support, and how important social support is for our resilience, to being able to depend on other people and having other people there. It is the number one topic, I would say, in the resilience research and the well-being research, that it is the biggest driver of our resilience is social support, okay, our ability to be with others. Some of you mentioned faith, and faith is also one of those things that helps us build our resilience and to keep our resilience. So having a faith community, and that kind of sort of overlaps a little bit with that social support, because sometimes our faith communities can provide us with that fellowship that we need to help us through difficult times, and having that faith in something bigger than ourselves. That gets to, and I think we'll probably talk a little bit more later about it, but it also gets to finding meaning in adversity, which is very important for our resilience, is being able to find a meaning in the difficulties that we face. You also mentioned, several people mentioned staying positive, having a positive attitude, being future focused. That is another area of the resilience research which has come out, being able to have hope and optimism. And that is very future looking. The ability to know that, to be able to stay optimistic, to know that you're going to get through it. Optimistic people know that difficult experiences are only temporary, and that you will get through it, that it is something that you can face, that you can manage. But it is, of course, only temporary, and it is not a permanent type of situation. So, for example, knowing that if something happens where, let's say you fail an exam, there's a big difference between saying, I failed this exam because I'm stupid. Being stupid is sort of a permanent condition. Or you can say, I failed the exam because I got drunk the night before and was hungover, or I failed the exam because I didn't study for the exam, which is both of those things are fixable situations. So staying positive, staying optimistic is very important in keeping our resilience.
Perfect. Laura, we are months into our COVID-19 quarantine, and you mentioned many of the things, such as social support, which for some of us has been very challenging to do when we are to be social distancing, and caring about our loved ones and not wanting to run any risk. How do you see us using resiliency going forward in this arena months ahead?
Yeah, first I'd like to say that I've been impressed about how people are staying connected. I don't like the term social distancing. I prefer physical distancing. Okay? I personally, I, I'm sorry, I missed that, Reagan.
Can you tell us how you see those two being different?
Sure. Physical distancing. So if you are, in a grocery store, or if you have family members in other places that you're not physically close to them, but thank goodness we have the technology in most cases where we can stay socially connected. Personally, I have heard from people that I haven't heard from in a long time. I've reached out to people that I said, gee, I haven't talked to that person in quite a while. And what the virus is doing, at least for me, and I can see it in other people as well, is sort of encouraging us to reach out to people we haven't talked to in a while, to say, excuse me, hey, how are you doing? Are you doing okay? Is there anything you need? And you can be, let's say, in the grocery store, and you can still talk to people, right? You're just doing it you're not physically as close as you might be normally, but you can still, people can tell when you're smiling underneath your mask, your eyes are smiling, and when you're friendly and kind to people, doing good works, and doing nice things for people, that carries a lot of weight. And I think one of the things that is very important for all of us, particularly now and to continue in the future, is to maintain that gratitude for what we have. So much of what we're hearing in the news is negative, and it's easy to get caught up in that. But what we can carry forward is looking at those things that may be bringing us joy right now. And I think, I mentioned this a little bit earlier today, Reagan, is it's easy to fall into the trap of listening to the news, listening to social media and various other places where people are saying, oh, this is so terrible. Oh, this is so awful. And it's not that it's not. This is an extremely serious situation. And we all need to be looking out for one another. But at the same time, it's okay to feel joy. Mm-hmm. It's okay to feel grateful for what we have. Mm-hmm. To look around, maybe you are at home with your kids, maybe you have stressful moments, but I'm sure there's also moments where you're thinking, wow, it's great to have some more time with my kids, and to help them grow and watch them to develop, and be able to have that opportunity to step back from our busy lives and have those situations. So it's okay to see positive things in this negative situation. In fact, I would encourage it, and I would encourage counting our blessings, being grateful for those things that we do have. What that does, when we're able to be grateful, when we're able to see the positive, it helps us to be able to take thoughtful, positive action to help others. In a sense, when we're negative and we're thinking about how bad it is and how bad our situation is, and we're focused on that, we are very much into ourselves. When we can be grateful for what we have, recognize what we have, that opens up our capacity to be able to help others and to think about others, and then take some actions that would.
It sounds like that's a really good way for us to also foster having empathy and caring for one another. And I think in a very divisive time that we're in right now, COVID aside, just making sure that we are, looking out for one another and the people we care about. And I think even on a higher level, people that we may not know, how it looks in our community. I don't know everybody that lives in my community, but that I can care for my neighborhood, my community, my city that I live in. And I think, Laura, the other thing I heard you say is that knowing that it's okay to be joyful, to feel gratitude, to feel happy during a very difficult time. Because I think you're right. Sometimes we forget that, or there is such a seriousness, and not, like you said, not that this isn't serious and not that things happening right now aren't terrible, but allowing ourselves to feel joy, allowing ourselves to be happy, allowing ourselves to have those positive emotions as well, sounds like a big part in building our resiliency.
Yes, it actually is. And what we need to remember is, according to the research, the brain operates on something called the negativity bias. Mm. So our brains, because of how we developed as human beings, and, originally when we were not at the top of the food chain and humans were being chased by saber-toothed tigers, and we had to do whatever we could do to protect ourselves. We had to assume that things were threatening out there in the big bad world. Our brains developed to assume that there were threats. Mm-hmm. So what our brains naturally do is focus on the negative. And all you need to do is turn on the evening news to see that there's so much negativity. When that's not an actual or real reflection of the world that we live in. We have to, because of that though, because we're predisposed to focus on the negative, we have to deliberately, consciously try to get ourselves to focus on the positive. When we focus on the negative, what happens is we end up with tunnel vision. Okay? The world closes in on us. We get tunnel vision, and the only thing that we can see is that negative thing in front of us. When we start focusing on things that are positive and start experiencing positive emotions, finding the joy in daily events, being optimistic, being hopeful, and generating those things, and feeling love and caring for the people around us, whether it's our families, our friends, our communities, that opens up that aperture. And this is according to the research and the science saying we can then start seeing solutions to problems. We start seeing a greater variety of options that we can count on. So something that you mentioned, Ragen, and yes, this is a serious situation, but the difference is when we're coming from a place of negativity, we act out of fear. Mm. Okay? And it's understandable. The fear is understandable, particularly because it's a fear of the unknown. And there are a lot of things that we still don't know. We've learned a lot, but a lot of things we still don't know about this virus and how it's transmitted. But there's a big difference between acting out of fear and negativity and acting out of from a positive situation where we do those prudent things to protect ourselves and to protect others. That's a very different mindset.
Yeah, thank you. Laura, we're going to move into talking about well-being, the other part of the title for our webinar. So how is well-being connected to resiliency? That's the first part of my question. And the second is, what are some practices that we can put into place that support both resiliency and well-being?
So resilience and well-being are very closely related. They overlap, and in the research, they overlap considerably, but not 100%.
Okay.
So in order to have well-being, being resilient is a very big part of that. Mm-hmm. Having, being able to experience positive emotions and life satisfaction. Mm-hmm. Being resilient is a huge aspect of well-being.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how do
but
you,
not exactly. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
sorry, Laura, how do you define well-being, or what are some qualities or characteristics of well-being?
Well, from a research standpoint, there's something called subjective well-being. Okay, and it's a very scientific sort of definition. So it is a measure of someone's life satisfaction and their what they call positive and negative affect balance. So basically that deals with your emotions. How many positive emotions are you feeling versus how many negative emotions are you feeling, and how do you evaluate your own life? So I would underscore that subjective part. It all depends on the individual and how they happen to see their lives. There are some people who have what we would call a lot of material things, the things that should make them happy, and they're not. Then there are people in other parts of the world, some very poor parts of the world, who are extremely happy
Mm.
and find their happiness or their well-being in different ways. And I kind of combine it. I'll just clarify, when we say well-being, we're really sort of talking more on the scientific research type of definition. In the common discussion, we're referring to happiness.
Okay.
So that's how most people would probably hear it and hear it being discussed is happiness. But of course, what makes one person happy versus what makes another person happy is very different.
Yeah.
And that's totally fine.
Yeah. Thank you. Laura, many of us, alternatives, our work is working with children and young people. Many of us may have, that are attendees today or that are watching us, may have children, grandchildren, nieces and nephews, may work with children, maybe educators. How important is the resiliency of parents and teachers and those of us that are adults that are around children and youth in helping to develop resiliency in children?
I think that's extremely important. One of the other contributions to our resilience is having positive role models of resilience. So for children to be able to see their parents being resilient is extremely important. For adults, I would say think of someone in your life that you've known who has shown resilience, is an example of resilience, and think about and sort of pick apart, what is it that made them resilient? What did they do? What was their attitude? Were they optimistic people? I would say they probably were optimistic, probably people who supported others and received support as well, people who were, took care of themselves physically, mentally. So think about, for parents, I would say, think about somebody in your life who's resilient and then try to model that behavior for your kids. I want to emphasize that that does not mean you have to bury your emotions about this. Okay, that's not being resilient. Burying your emotions is not being resilient. Being resilient is being able to look at the situation realistically. And when I say optimistic, I want to emphasize what we call realistic optimism versus blind optimism or seeing everything through rose-colored glasses. That's not what we're talking about here. When we say be optimistic, it's be realistic, because we all know life isn't all puppies and kittens, right? But it's just not. So being able to see a situation realistically, then, as I said, not dwelling on the negative, taking that and saying, okay, what are the positive things that we can do? How can we deal with this in a positive way, while understanding there are certain things that we may not be able to do? So, for example, there's not much parents can do if the schools are closed. Okay, that's what you have to do. That's the situation. You prefer that they be open, but they're just not. So what can we do as positive options to work with this situation? And when kids see their parents doing that, that helps build those skills in those children that they can then carry forward into adulthood.
Great, thank you. I'd like you to ask our participants to put in the chat, maybe to share with us some ways that you use to foster resiliency with your family, with children or young people that you work with, because I think we all probably have great answers together. So if you could put in the chat some tools or techniques that you use to foster resiliency with children and young people that you may have in your life or that you work with. And I'll give a few minutes for that. Casey said, we take breaks daily from work, yes, and homework, and go on long walks or spend time in the backyard. Wonderful, wonderful. So needed for so many of us. It's easy, I think, to probably just Zoom all day or sit in front of the computer or laptop, whatever technology we're on. Yes, taking break, being out in nature, I know helps many people, kind of gives that sense of groundedness. Journaling and weekly family checkups.
Okay.
Nice. Keeping a regular.
And Ragen, if I can say that, as far as being out in, there's a whole area of emerging research on the impact of nature on the positive impact, and so getting out there in nature is extremely helpful and does help our well-being and our resilience.
Wonderful. They said journaling, yes, and weekly family checkups, as we mentioned. I think that's great. Checking in with one another as a family. How are we doing? How are we feeling? Keeping that regular routine plus outside time, wonderful. I think routine is so important, right? It's one of the things maybe that when things seem out of control, that maybe we have a feeling of control around. Is that routine. Making time for talking about how we're feeling, yes, and then providing an outlet. And I think, Laura, you spoke to that and saying it's not about pushing down those feelings or feeling like even as a grown-up or an adult that we can't share our own feelings with kids.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Working with kids to, quote, hit the reset button. Learning to take a step back, take a break, start over later. Yeah. I think that's a wonderful thing too, because I know with the kids that we work with, one of the things we're trying to help them with is persistence. And so you can start over if that didn't work out, or let's, take a pause a minute, or as Mara said, hitting the reset button. Yeah.
In fact, I will have an exercise for you later on that.
Great. Other responses are having a weekly family Zoom meeting. You go back up. Focusing on how blessed we are, which, Laura, I think that goes back to what you said, that idea of gratitude. What are the things that we can have gratitude and appreciation for? Maria says humor and positive acknowledgments. Yes, right. We all like to be acknowledged, right? When we're doing good or someone catches, I think with kids too, especially knowing a grown-up or an adult we caught their eye. Being encouraging to our children and family members. Yeah. Providing a safe space to talk and to ask questions. I think that's so important. A lot of what we talk about, I know, with resiliency is not just that physical safe space, but an emotionally safe space as well. Mm-hmm. Practicing acceptance techniques to decrease negative emotions. Yeah, right. I always say, like you were saying, it's okay to be angry, but we have to maybe even help think through some consequences. Recognizing that I teach what I model. Good. And then let me see our Facebook answers. Charles might have to help me here. Checking in on our Facebook Live folks as well.
Okay, while you're doing that, if I have a couple of comments on some of the things that you all said. These are all great comments, and a lot of it goes to what we already talked about gratitude and social support. I'd like to talk about humor and laughter. These are extremely important. And going back to what I said originally about being able to experience those positive emotions, laughter actually has been shown. When I say laughter, I mean that good, loud belly laugh. That has actually been shown to strengthen our immune system. So some of these things that I talk about in resilience actually have very clear physical effects. And I think keeping our immune system strong right now is extremely important. So that humor, that laughter is really important. Boosts our immune system. It actually has been shown to increase our longevity too. So go ahead and laugh. And at the end, I'll include something called laughter yoga in our resources. Where you can go online and people are from all around the world just get together and they just laugh for absolutely no reason whatsoever. And they keep it going. See, it's working already, Ragen.
It is.
And they just, laugh and they keep it going for about 15, 20 minutes. And it's a real boost emotionally and physically.
Wonderful.
And let's see.
Participants, Laura also mentioned, again, being out in nature, and then mindfulness was mentioned as well.
Yeah, that's also very important. Being aware of, what's going on around you, but also being, non-judgmental, having compassion for yourselves and for others. But, that compassion for others starts with ourselves, starts with our being able to be compassionate with ourselves. And then we can extend that to other people. So that is very important. So practicing acceptance, I just want to look at that for a minute. One of the important things about resilience is being able to reappraise a situation. And I had mentioned before about finding meaning in a difficult situation. There is something called, which you all probably heard of, which is called post-traumatic growth. Okay, this may not be necessarily a traumatic situation, but it's a difficult situation, but one from which we can all grow and learn. But being able to reappraise it, being able to look at find the silver lining in the difficulty, really helps us to find meaning in it, and it helps us to decrease those negative emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And one other thing I'd like to mention, which has been shown to be very good for resilience and to help the brain, is play. Getting out there and playing with our kids.
Mm-hmm.
Letting them play with one another as much as we can safely. Getting out there ourselves and games and play is extremely healthy for our brains.
Yeah, that's true, Laura. And I think that's one thing that we forget to do even as adults. Sometimes we think, oh, we have to be so serious, or we forget as adults to make time to play, whether that's with kids or even if that's just being silly, with other grown-ups as well. So important for all of us. Laura, we have a couple more questions before we open up our Q&A. So one of the questions that I have is, what can we do to keep our resiliency strong as our lives start to return? There's many questions as what's the new normal? Is this a temporary normal? We have a lot of unknowns, but regardless, what can we do to keep our resiliency strong?
Well, if it's okay with you, I think this might be an opportunity to introduce a couple of tools and techniques. So in addition to everything that we've talked about, there are a couple of things which I call sort of quick resilience techniques, things that we can use in the heat of the moment, things that, when things are just really, really stressful in that moment that we can turn to that will help us. One of the first things is just to ask ourselves a question, okay? And the question is, am I all right now?
What a powerful question.
Am I all right now? And what I mean by that is getting down to some very basic level of being all right. So the question means, do I have air to breathe that is healthy air, okay, or it's not going to kill me? Am I warm enough? Okay? Do I have basic, my basic needs met, and very basic needs met, food, clothing, and shelter? Do I have those things? And is the chair that I'm sitting in right now, am I afraid that it's going to fall out from under me? Okay, probably not. So all those things, when we look at it from that basic perspective, ask ourselves when we're getting upset, when we're feeling stressed and overwhelmed, just stop and say, am I all right now? Let's be honest with ourselves. 99.9% of the time, the answer to that question is going to be, well, yes, I am all right. At rare occasion, when the honest answer is no, I'm not, then we need to take a look at that. That's a situation that we need to address. But just remember that question, am I all right now? You had
mindfulness. How am I in this present moment?
Exactly. Yeah. So one other technique that I want to teach you all, and that adults can teach to children, it's a basic breathing exercise. So how many times have you all said, when kids are getting upset or we're getting upset, somebody will say, just breathe, right? Just breathe. Okay, that actually is very helpful advice when we can step back and actually breathe. So I want to give you a breathing technique developed by the Heart Math organization, Heart Math Institute out in California. There's a whole lot of science behind this, which I won't go into today, but just so that this is backed up by research, that it does help us to calm down and be able to think more clearly. So what I'd like for everybody to do is get into a comfortable position, and you can put your feet on the floor. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing that, but if you don't feel comfortable doing that, then you don't need to close your eyes. And I want you to focus your attention on your heart center, in your heart, and that heart center of your chest, and focus on your breathing. What I'd like you to do is breathe in a little slower and deeper than you normally would. And you can breathe in for 5 seconds if that timing helps you, and breathe out for 5 seconds. And just establish that rhythm. So breathing in slower and deeper than you normally would, and exhale a little slower and deeper than you normally would. It's a very simple technique that I think we can teach our kids as well. And when they get practice at it, and keep breathing as I'm talking, keep breathing that way, slower and deeper than you normally would. And our kids, when they're getting upset or stressed, we can, after they get practiced at this, we can just say, do your breathing exercise. So instead of yelling at them to breathe, we can just say, remember your breathing exercise. Okay. Now, I just want you to add one thing to that. As you're breathing in slower and deeper than you normally would, I want you to extend compassion or care to someone or something. That could be a friend, a family member, could even be a pet. Pets are family. They bring us a lot of love. So extend that compassion or care for somebody or something in your life as you're breathing in slower and deeper than you normally would, and breathing out slower and deeper than you normally would. Okay. So that is the heart math exercise.
Very nice.
And if I can give you just one more, and keep breathing that way if you would, what I want you to do is focus on one thing, and just one thing that is very positive in your life. Maybe it's something that happened today or over the last week, something you may be grateful for, something that you appreciate, and just focus on that one thing as you're breathing in and out. You don't need to worry about anything else, but just that one thing. And it could be something very simple, simple as I had a great cup of coffee this morning. And think about what it looked like, what it smelled like, what it sounded like, what it felt like, was it warm, what it tasted like. And then just make that as big as you possibly can in your mind. Make it big, big, big. And then bring it into your body. Almost like drinking that hot cup of coffee or that hot cup of tea and feeling that hot cup of coffee on a cold day and how that feels in your body. Bring that positive thing into your body. As you're breathing in and breathing out compassion and care. So how does that feel?
Yeah, please type in the chat. How did that practice feel?
I recognize it was a bit abbreviated, but
Very calming. Thank you, Donna. Refreshing, relaxing. Wonderful. Relaxing, calming, renewing. Yes. Just that little bit of breathing, I think, to take that moment of mindfulness. Soothing. Thank you, Nikki. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Laura. That's a really good technique that I think we can certainly use throughout our day, or even in the morning to set our intention for the day, or before we go to bed, or when things are feeling a little crazy or hectic or stressful in our day. That's something that's a great technique. One last question before we move to Q&A, because I see some questions, and if you all have questions, you can go ahead and type them in the chat and we'll get to those in a moment. If I wanted to learn more about resiliency, what are some resources you recommend? I know you mentioned HeartMath. I know you mentioned Laughing Yoga. Are there any others that you would recommend for us?
One of the things, well, it depends. There are several, and I would say that the best book on resilience that I have found is called Resilience, The Science of Mastering Life's Greatest Challenges by Dr. Stephen Southwick and Dr. Dennis Charney. Really good research in there, but it's very, very readable and difficult experiences, and they've been able to bring that research together for us in that book. There's also one for educators, which I can recommend. It's called Dancing in the Rain by Jerome Murphy. And the full title is Dancing in the Rain, Leading with Compassion, Vitality, and Mindfulness in Education. There's some really great exercises in here as well.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's also a book that is going that we and our kids can do. And besides reaching out and helping others, which is important for our resilience as well, is helping others because it in turn helps us. It's better to give than to receive, has a lot of scientific background to it. That's actually quite true. There's a book called Keep Your Brain Alive. And one of the other things that we can do is You know, it's really important for resilience to keep our brains active and to challenge our brains. And every time we learn something new, it helps our brains. But there are also some exercises that can be done that challenge our brains. So for example, if we do things with our non-dominant hand, so our non-dominant hand is, in my case, it's my left hand. If you brush your teeth or comb your hair with your non-dominant hand, then that's something that makes your brain stand up and pay attention. Or if we get dressed with our eyes closed, things that we would normally do, where we can challenge ourselves. So that book is lots of exercises in there called Keep Your Brain Alive.
Laura, can you repeat?
83 Neurobic Exercises by Lawrence Katz.
Oh, sorry. Can you repeat the name of the first book you mentioned?
Sure. And Ragen, would you want me to write this down that you can send it out to folks?
Yeah, that would be great. We can put it up on our Facebook page as well.
I'll repeat it, and then I'll provide it to Ragen, and then you can send it. So the first book is called Resilience, The Science of Mastering Life's Greatest Challenges.
Great.
And the authors are Southwick and Charney.
Great. Thank you.
Also, yes, Laughter Yoga is laughteryoga.org. Okay, and you can, they Skype and they Zoom sessions. You'll see that on there. The Greater Good Science Center. For those of you, particularly who are educators, there's a lot of good material there. They are at UC Berkeley, and they do a lot of research in well-being and resilience, and just tons of resources there for you. And they are at greatergood.berkeley.edu. Also, Heart Math is Heart Math. Yes, it's Heart, HEARTMATH.org. Lots of videos there. Rick Hansen is also one of my favorites. He's the Are You All Right Now person, and the one that we did the savoring exercise. It's rickhansen.net. He has some very helpful videos, and he's both of those organizations have things on there that are directly related to what we're going through. And a great movie, which is actually a documentary to share with your family. It's called Happy. So known as Happy, and Rocco Belic, Belic, is the person who made that movie. So you can find it on YouTube and Amazon and some other places. So that's just a great movie to sit and watch with your family, to see how other people find happiness and well-being and resilience in their lives.
Thank you. Laura, we have a couple minutes and we have a question. And so I would ask any participants, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, but we have a question. Reports show that more people are tuning into the news by approximately 8 hours more per week. How do you stay informed without the negativity from media adding fuel to a raging fire?
Right, that's a great question. It's easy to get sucked into the news. And that goes back to the comments that we were talking about our negativity bias. So the first thing is to have that awareness of how our brains are working. And I'll say it's not you, it's your brain that's attracted to that negativity in the news. So I would say to impose a little discipline on yourselves, as far as that could be the number of hours that you are going to spend listening or watching the news. I would say when things start to get repetitive, which they do, then that's the time to turn it off. So I've heard this already. That means you are informed and you don't need to listen to it anymore. Okay, you're good. So go off and do something positive when you get to that point.
Great, thank you. All right, are there any other questions or comments? Feel free to put them in the chat as we wrap up our time together. We'll give a minute. Shereen says, thank you for your discussion. I enjoyed your perspective on the term social distancing. I have not connected to the term social distancing from the beginning and feel more connected to the term about physical distancing. Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Laura, for that distinction. I think that's so true. Language is important. Yeah. Thank you, Casey, for coming. Maria said, thinking back to your discussion, sounds like well-being is the outcome. Yes, thanks, Maria. Okay. Any other questions or comments? If not, we will start to wrap up.
Is there anything on Facebook, or are you looking at that as well?
Okay. Look here, Charles is being good and helping me. I think we're set. All right. Yeah. Thank you all again so much for attending this session with Alternatives and with Laura. We so appreciate you, Laura, for giving time to us today and talking with all of us about resiliency and well-being. If people would like more information, they can certainly contact me at rjohnson@altinc.org. They can also visit our Facebook page and our website. Oh, we have one question coming in, sorry. Our last few minutes. Can you talk about how your students have responded to resiliency training? The students, Laura, that you work with, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it's actually been a great semester, I have to say. They have been very responsive, and I was kind of joking with them because you know, at the beginning of the semester, before all of this started, I was talking about preparing for an adversity in your life. I was thinking, you know, down the road, a few years from now, that kind of thing. And then it hit us right in the middle of the semester, and no one was expecting this. And I said, hey guys, guess what? We're going to put all of these things into real life, real time practice. And they were great. They did the exercises, they did the practices, and they came back to me in the last week of the semester. So many of them commented about how much these things helped get them through this difficult time and the things that were happening to them. And it was, they really put it to good use. So I'm really proud of them for actually using all of these things in a real-time situation.
Wonderful. All right, if there's no other questions or comments, I have listed in the chat my email and ways that you can connect to Alternatives, as well as our Facebook page. We did record, so if you know of someone that you would like to refer the webinar to that was not able to make it during our time together, we will have that up there for replay. And we will also make sure that Laura's going to give me those resources for those of you that are interested, and we'll post those as well. So thank you all so much. We're going to end right on the dot here. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and be safe and be healthy. Thank you all.
Thank you, Erin. It's been a real pleasure being with you today.
Thanks, Laura.